Hey guys, Matt here. This is my review of Beetlejuice, or Beetlejuice 2 for short. This movie is directed by Tim Burton, who previously directed the first Beetlejuice, Batman, Corpse Bride, Edward Scissorhands, and a whole bunch of other classic movies. Now, the movie stars Winona Ryder, Michael Keaton, Catherine O'Hara, Jenny Ortega, and Monica Bellucci. Now, the plot of this movie is there's been a death in the Dietz family, and so the mother, Catherine O'Hara, the daughter, Winona Ryder, and now the granddaughter, played by Jenny Ortega, must reunite at their homestead for a funeral. But while they're there, Winona Ryder's Lydia Dietz has this new career as like this ghost hunter type persona, and she's able to see dead people. Well, she keeps having visions of someone she was hoping to forget, and that is Beetlejuice. Now, going into this movie, I was like, okay, I was never a huge fan of the original movie because I guess when I was younger, I didn't really understand it. But as an adult, it's fun. It's got that dark Tim Burton humor to it. And Michael Keaton plays Beetlejuice in such a way that he's like a fun bad guy. And so, having seen movies like Dumb and Dumber 2, and all these other legacy sequels that have come many years after the original, I was like, this movie's probably going to be fun and enjoyable, and I'm sure the cast had a good time making it, but it's not a sequel that we need. And having seen it, yes, that's exactly the case with this movie. Now, let me start with the acting. Michael Keaton is Beetlejuice. He's having fun with the role. He still has the ability to go into that persona of this trickster demon where he has a good time, but he has his own agenda. There's moments where he's able to get spooked and, surprised by things, which is nice. He's not the one that has all the power, all the control, because in this movie, he kind of seems like he's a genie let out of his bottle. And so once he's able to have free reign to do whatever he wants, then he has fun with it. Unfortunately, like the first movie, he's not in this film as much as he was, which would be fine, but because this movie has so many characters and subplots in it, his presence, it's nice to see him, but he kind of seems to get lost in the shuffle, because there's a subplot of Beetlejuice's ex-wife, played by Monica Bellucci. There's a subplot of the death in the Dietz family of Charles, which I'll get to in a moment. There's a subplot of the daughter, Jenny Ortega, meets this boy. There's another subplot of just them exploring the underworld. There's Willem Dafoe in this movie as a deceased actor who believes he's a cop. There's so much in this movie that it all just seems to be a whole bunch of plot lines running together. It's like they couldn't decide of which storyline they wanted to go with, so they were like, hey, let's include it all. There's a song in the third act that is pretty much how I believe Tim Burton felt about making this movie, which I'll get to in a moment. Jenny Ortega as the granddaughter, she's fine. I felt like she plays the really quiet, downer, angsty teenager a little too well. She was really good in Wednesday, but I felt like her character really didn't emote a whole lot and didn't really have any arc until the third act of the movie. Winona Ryder as Lydia Dietz, she was fine. As an older version of that character, I thought she was okay. Justin Theroux's in this as her love interest. Nothing really to say about that character. If you liked him in Wanderlust with Paul Rudd and Jennifer Aniston, he plays the same kind of role. A guy that's almost overconfident about things, but he's really just an idiot. Willem Dafoe is in this. It's cool that Willem Dafoe is in a Tim Burton movie. And I like how he's into all this macabre, kind of silly, zany, horror type stuff. But he wasn't needed in this movie. Monica Bellucci doesn't have very many lines of dialogue in this movie, but when you're Monica Bellucci, you really don't need it. But her character introduction was really nice, but then I felt like her storyline was wrapped up a little too quick, which is an issue I have with this movie, and that's the third act. Catherine O'Hara, she's great. She's always been good. She was good in Schitt's Creek. She's good in Beetlejuice, Home Alone. I've enjoyed her in everything she's in. The bright side and the best thing about this movie is Tim Burton using his practical effects to make the underworld and all of the supernatural, kind of gross things seem real and tangible. This wasn't a huge CGI fest. The underworld felt like it was a real place where you could walk around and touch things. And I liked how, his sense of quirkiness, I guess, is really prevalent in this movie as opposed to like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Dumbo and a couple other movies that he's done recently where he's used a lot of CGI and it just doesn't feel like the environments are real and that real people could exist there. Here, in the underworld, in the Dietz home, with everything being, dark and crooked and twisted and that Tim Burton-esque style, here everything looked great. There was a couple scenes at the beginning of the movie where they're telling a story about the death in the family that's, stop motion, animated kind of claymation type look, and that was fine. And then you have the sandworms in the third act that, use some CGI, but, you gotta have sandworms in a Beetlejuice story, right? So they're fine for what they were. The look of everything was great. I'll give it that. That's probably this movie's top marks, is everything looked really good. It's almost as if Tim Burton wanted to elaborate more on his underworld and all of the, purgatory type things, because he really did go overboard in a sense with all of these characters and how, their deceased bodies kind of depict and show you how they died. Well, they did a lot of that in this movie. It's like they wanted to do more of that in the first movie and just really couldn't think of a good storyline to do it for, so that's what they did here. They did mostly underworld stuff. Meanwhile, they wanted to rekindle the Beetlejuice Lydia Dietz storyline, and they wanted to introduce, I guess, a third generation of Dietz, being the granddaughter, and it's all good, but all together in the same movie, it's just a lot. And a lot of the characters in this film feel like idiots. Like they're all dumb. Like they've all never encountered this stuff before, or when they do, they react in ways that just don't seem realistic. I get it. It's a Tim Burton movie. Your characters are going to be silly, and it's going to have like this kind of dark horror aspect to it. But I just felt like everyone was reacting like a cartoon. Where you have a scene where a character walks down a hallway, and as soon as they turn the corner, another character walks and looks for them. And it kind of felt like a Scooby-Doo episode at some points. I will say some new additions to this movie is, I'll say the use of cursing in this movie. When you have a PG-13 movie, you're allowed one F word, and I'll say they use it, but then after that, the way they cover up for it, I thought was pretty clever. I laughed out loud. The use of music, the use of a guitar and some Richard Marx with Beetlejuice was really good. The song in the third act, they tried to be their, Day-O type moment, was fine. I mean, I'll say the song choice was quite a bit surprised, because if you didn't know that MacArthur Park was sung by Richard Harris, aka the first two Dumbledores, that was pretty cool. But the song lyrics really, to me, was a testament of how Tim Burton felt while making this movie. Like, he's singing about a cake and how he couldn't get the recipe right because he wasn't sure the magic was going to be there still, and that's more or less the theme of this movie, is the ingredients are there. This movie had so much to keep track of, and I wish they had stuck with one storyline regarding maybe Beetlejuice and his wife, or Lydia Dietz still being able to see dead people and her trying to find her deceased husband, which is another subplot that they talk about, but they really don't wrap up or do anything with until the third act of the movie. There's an actor named Jeffrey Jones who was Charles Dietz, the father in the original film. He got in some legal trouble, so to not put him in this movie, he's the character that's deceased. They used his imagery in his pictures, but when it came time for the acting role of that character, they didn't use him, which for good reason. But I felt like they maybe spent a little too much time on that character. Now, he wasn't a huge role in the first one, but they could have just easily explained away what happened to his character, just the same way they did with the characters of the Maitlands, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. They're not in this film either, but they do mention them, and they have a good reference or a good reason as to why they aren't. They spend more time on Charles Dietz, someone that I feel like the filmmakers and producers were trying to avoid entirely, than they do the character of Lydia Dietz's deceased husband, which seems to play a pivotal role in this movie, regarding the relationship between the mother and the daughter. Yet, when they do address that stuff, it's late in the movie and they don't shine enough light on it. It's like if that's the main focus that you want to have involving the relationship between these two characters that are your main characters, focus on that. If you want to throw Beetlejuice in that mix too and have him be, involved with it, that's fine. But they don't. So this was a bunch of small ideas that they just couldn't decide which one to stick with, so they just threw them all together. There is a nice flashback in this movie involving Beetlejuice and his ex-wife, which I liked because we never really got to see Beetlejuice before he was the demon version. So that was cool, but other than that, this movie just was just a mixing pot of a whole bunch of ideas, and they couldn't stick with one, so they decided to just go from one zany idea to another. This should have been just a 45-minute short instead of a full-length movie. I'm glad everyone had fun making this movie, and it's really cool they all decided to come back for it. But this is just one of those legacy sequels that's a little too late. It's cool that we got something, but it's not something we needed. So because of that, I'm going to give Beetlejuice a C. Till next time, guys. See ya.